Good afternoon, and welcome to Straight Talking with Kelly, where real conversations happen. This is where you will meet some of the most intelligent, creative, and talented people who come to share tips, resources, and knowledge on various topics. The guests come from many industries that include education, music, television, theater, fashion, culinary arts, and community advocates. Join me today in welcoming Carol Francois.
Thank you.
She's going to talk about the impact her iconic father had on civil rights in San Francisco. You're like, who was her father? You'll find out in a minute. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you. Good to
But
see
of
you.
course, I'm talking about they'll find out in a minute, and it's right behind you. Okay, his name is right behind you. Duh. All right. So, Carol, I'm really excited about having you on the show today. How you feeling?
Doing all right.
Good, good. So, Carol, let me read a little bit about your background before we get into talking about your dad, okay?
All
So, you are the youngest daughter. You are an author, a licensed acupuncturist, and an artist. And you currently reside in Northern California with your dog Nia, and I'm sure Nia might be sitting on your lap at some point. You did make that clear. So, folks, if Nia comes, just give her some respect. So, Carol, tell me, give me a little bit about your background on where you were born and raised, what schools you went to, all that jazz.
Okay. Well, I was born and raised in San Francisco, 1962, and I went to grammar school at West Portal, and then let's see, second grade, my father had me. Well, he took me out of West Portal to go to a school that he had started with a woman named Frances Cessna. The school is called Multicultural Institute, and it was an experimental school. It was funded by the Rockefeller and Ford Foundation, but the purpose was to help children to have a sense of their ethnic identities. Like in the morning, we would have classes, like math and reading, and in the afternoon, we would study our ethnic backgrounds. But the idea was that children need to have a sense of who they are before they can really flourish in the world, and as an African American child and or a Mexican child, growing up in a culture that is not your own and given history that is not your own, to study, it leaves you not knowing who you are.
Yeah.
And to empower children in this country that are not of the dominant culture is really extremely important, because otherwise you grow up feeling inferior, and how do you overcome that?
Now, I actually feel, isn't it by design that it's set up that way?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, definitely by design.
And this whole discussion on critical race theory and whatnot is, it's to hide the past.
Yeah.
They don't want their own children to feel, like their ancestors were bad, had done anything wrong. But we didn't know it all. I mean,
I mean, they're taking out Black history or all kinds of ethnic histories out of the schools' books and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you
that
can
they
do that, but
is,
that's still not going to change what the real history is.
Exactly. Well, and we need more history than we were slaves.
Right. Exactly. Because we were so much more than that.
If culture started in Africa thousands of years ago, of course, there's more history to be told. So.
So that school must have had a real important impact on you.
Oh, very much so.
And then after you went there, how long were you there?
That school, it lost its funding, and so then they pulled me out. And in fourth grade, in the middle of fourth grade, I went to St. Cecilia's, It's a school in not far from our house. It's where there's our parish. We're Catholic, so it was our parish home.
Okay.
And it's a school of like 600 kids. And I was the only African American kid. So
Oh my
I was,
goodness.
it's whole other host of interesting things.
Well, but you know what? But because of that other early teaching that you had, I'm sure you went in with a nice, strong sense of self, right?
I did, but at 8, 9 years old, it's
Oh, okay. That was young. Yeah.
I felt kind of like I was in a zoo or something. The kids would stare at me. Actually, one of my friends told me recently that they had made an announcement, to treat me with the utmost respect and whatnot. My father was supervisor then too. So, I was, that part was a little different. Sometimes I'd come to school in like the mayor's limousine, if my father was acting mayor that week, I'd
Okay.
in school.
Oh, so wait a minute. So you had a little clout.
Yeah. Plus,
Very
actually,
nice.
my friend was Jerry Brown's niece and Pat Brown's granddaughter. So we used to walk to school, and it helped to give me just a little more stability there, because she understood the whole political, being in the political arena, and we'd have some pretty deep conversations. So that was helpful. She's actually my lifelong friend, and she just called me a few minutes ago. But
Okay.
we've known each other since we were like toddlers. So
Okay, nice.
yeah.
So now, and after, where did you go to high school?
I went to St. Rose Academy, and
Okay.
which is on Pine and Pierce. But that school, in the '89 earthquake, it had a lot of damage, and they tore it down. But it was an all-girl Catholic high school.
Okay.
It was cool,
And then what about college? Where did you go to college?
San Francisco State University.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, that's where I went. That's my alma mater. Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, and that's where I started studying Chinese medicine. So
that was my next question: is how did you get into acupuncturist? How did you become that?
Well, when I went to SF State, I started studying like holistic medicine or holistic health, and one of my teachers after the first semester mentioned that there was a new teacher for the Chinese medicine program. And it was, just basic Chinese medical theory and herbology. Okay. And so I took that class the next semester and became really good friends with the teacher, and ended up working in her office for a number of years, just out of interest. Okay. It was, back in that time, it was, a newly licensed profession. Prior to that, you had to be working under an MD in order to practice Chinese medicine. We couldn't do our own diagnosis and whatnot. But a couple of years before, I think Jerry Brown was governor then, and he made it a license for it and its own profession, so that it didn't have to be under the auspices of an MD. And so I studied with her and worked in the clinic, and then after a few years I graduated, but and I had all this background in Chinese medicine, but in Western theory, and I graduated and worked at the airport for like
Isn't that how it works?
Yeah, I was like, well, okay, now what do I do? So I was working at the airport, and actually I injured myself doing that one night, and I decided, this is not the place for me. Let me see what I can do. So I talked to my teacher. I'm still working in the office periodically, and asked her if she would be my tutor. Because there's two ways that you can sit for the state board in acupuncture. One is to go to acupuncture school, and the other is to do a tutorial program. So I had already had most of the requirements of tutorial program, and I just asked my teacher if she would tutor me, and I could finish that out and sit for the state boards, which I did. So
Okay.
yeah, so I
And so
passed
did
that.
you go into practice by yourself, or did you, how does that
Just
work?
office, and as well as at the in substance abuse. I worked in a substance abuse clinic at the Bayview Hunters Point Foundation
Oh,
for
okay.
a number of years, and then there, when I was working there, I met some other acupuncturists that were doing the same type of work, and we decided to form our own nonprofit organization. And in doing that, we combined or applied with UCSF and Walden House, which was Walden House at the time. It's no longer Walden House, it's another organization. But we got a grant to work in the San Francisco County jails, and in a program called the Sister Program. And it was a program to see if providing treatment to women in jail while they're in jail would help curb recidivism.
Okay.
And yeah, so there was counseling, there was acupuncture, there was they did theater and whatnot, and then UC did the study, the research component of it, and the conclusion was yes, having treatment in jail helps people not come back to jail. And,
Imagine that.
yeah, imagine. So anyway, and
Well,
we went on to do work in a number of other programs in the jail. But in around 2000, there was a big budget cut, and we lost a lot of our funding there.
okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, so then I worked in private practice the whole time too. At first, I worked in my teacher's office, and then after a few years, I worked with some of my former fellow students at the
Okay.
Lotus on Valencia Street.
Okay.
And, yeah, till a few years back.
Okay. Nice. Nice. Now, let's talk about that book you co-authored and published called The Adventures of Sasha and Malia at the White House. How did that come about? And what year, when did you publish that? What year was that?
Well, it was, I guess, what was it, 2008, around the
Okay.
time when Obama got elected the first time. I had a dream about, it was like a time travel kind of dream. And, so, and Sasha Malia encountered an individual from back in time that was in the White House, And I told a friend of mine about the dream, and she's a writer, and we just collaborated and decided to do a children's book.
And
And
it's
then,
beautifully done. It's so
oh,
beautifully illustrated. I mean, I actually got a copy for my granddaughter. So
oh,
I loved it. I thought it was really nicely done.
yeah, thanks. Yeah, luckily I found a illustrator that, I don't know, the kids' books now, they seem, they're all the drawings are like computer generated drawings, and I
Yeah.
just, oh, I wanted to find a illustrator that actually drew,
Yeah.
and did like, the books of our childhood, because
Yeah.
that's a large part of, the
Why books were so fascinating. Yeah, because
exact,
you look at the pictures. You look at the pictures.
exact.
Absolutely.
I used to spend a lot of time looking at the pictures, so I wanted something like that, not just some, animated looking kind of drawings.
Yeah. Well, it's a
And
beautiful book. And
like,
we'll be able to show that the cover of it a little bit later when we get to the slideshow portion of our interview. So now let's talk about that iconic dad that's right behind you right now. You know, your dad not only was an attorney, politician, and civil rights leader. When you sent me his memoirs, I'm like, oh my to goodness, this man is the real deal. He
yeah,
was with some of the best of the best. But
yeah,
before we dive down that little swimming pool, let's talk about where your dad was born. Where did he go to school? And then I know he was a Marine during World War II. So
Mhm.
talk about him a little bit for me.
Well, he was born in New Orleans in 1921. Um, he's actually a Terry Francois Jr. His father was a senior. Um, he started school at a very young age, pretty much as soon as he could start walking, because his aunt, who, as my mother would call her, was a spinster, which I love. It's like I think of myself as a spinster. Um, she used to bring him to school at like, 3 years old or something, So
Okay.
he was always kind of ahead of his age group and graduated from college at 18. So when most
Okay.
people are starting college, he was already graduating.
Wow.
He went to Xavier University, and then for his BA, and he gets in mathematics. And then he went to Atlanta University, where he, was exposed to all kind of the Black heroes, actually. Like,
Yes.
yeah, Mary McLeod Bethune and
And
W.
but Du Bois, I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's, I
And
mean, can you
Thurgood
imagine?
Marshall, I'm like, him and
Yeah,
Thurgood Marshall was like buddies.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he met all the heavy hitters there,
Yeah.
a lot of heavy hitters. And he was always about what was just and righteous. Even
Yeah.
at his funeral, his sister talked about how as a little boy, one time they got on the bus and he decided he wanted to sit right behind the bus driver. And everybody kind of looked at him like, boy, you better go to the back. And he said, I want to sit here. Why
So he,
can't I sit here?
yeah, it's
Yeah,
amazing. Now,
yeah.
how did he meet your mom? How did
Oh,
that happen?
he, actually, my mother and father are both from New Orleans, but they met out in the Bay Area. My mother had some cousins that lived in Oakland,
Okay.
and at the time she was living in Chicago, and she came out to visit. And one of her cousins had gone to school with my father and introduced them, and she was actually engaged to marry somebody else when they met. Uh, she called off,
Uh-oh.
but yeah, she went
Uh-oh,
back.
he rocked her world, huh? You rocked
Yeah,
my world.
he said he was a nice fellow, but he was, he worked at the post office or something. She wanted a more exciting life, so she
Mhm.
let that go, and she and my father got together. And I don't even know that they were together a year before they got married.
Okay.
But
Now, how
but
many?
hmm?
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead.
How many siblings?
I had four brothers, and two are living. Unfortunately, my brothers did not have good health.
Hmm.
My oldest brother Wade, he died of he had multiple sclerosis. My
Okay.
second brother Gary had kidney disease, and then my third brother Brian has multiple sclerosis,
Okay.
which is fairly strange because it's not really a familial kind of problem. But and then my brother Eric also he's had two strokes and has kidney problems too.
Okay. Okay.
So
And
yeah,
you're
I'm
the
trying.
only girl. You're the only daughter.
Uh, yeah.
And so you're around all of those boys. That must have been something.
Well, yeah, as the youngest, and you know, when I was little, they all had pairs of boxing gloves. But and Wade, of course, he tried to make sure I could defend myself. So he was
Okay.
really physical with me. Gary was very gentle with me. He used to take me on his dates and stuff. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
he was
Nice.
sweet.
Well,
Brian
how
was very
much younger were you than them? Were you
that's
really
about 14 years younger than Wade.
okay?
Gary about 11 years, Brian 9 years, and Eric almost 4 years younger.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So you really did have big brothers, didn't you?
oh yeah. They say
Yeah.
I was the basketball team.
And then most of your brothers, two of them were lawyers, or was it three of them?
No, just Wade who
Oh,
became a
okay.
lawyer.
I don't know Oh, I thought.
My father had his dithers. We'd all been lawyers, you know.
Mm-hmm,
Or,
mm-hmm.
you know, he said, if you're not going to be a lawyer, why don't you be a real doctor? He wasn't real thrilled when I was studying Chinese medicine.
Oh,
But
see,
my
yeah,
mother was
that was
like, he has to do what she wants to do. Otherwise, she's not going to be happy. So
great. Now, what kind of
mm.
law did your dad practice?
He had a general practice. You know, he did a
Oh,
lot of
okay.
pro bono work, you know, because folks in the community didn't necessarily have money, you know, so he
Yeah.
was always, um, yeah, he did general practice. He would take cases, you know, even if he knew he wasn't going to get paid. Sometimes he'd get paid in plants or, you know.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
reading his memoirs, I learned so much about your dad's civil rights efforts. You know, he was part of the sit-in restaurants down south along with Dick Gregory and Julian Bond. He was
Mhm.
friends with Martin Luther King, Thurgood Marshall, and so much more like that talked about. Now, did he ever talk about these things to you, or did you learn about them?
You know, when a lot of that was going on, I was really young, you know. I
Yeah.
remember just going to the airport with my mother to drop him off and pick him up, you know, but I didn't really understand all of what was going on. And I haven't really gotten a good understanding until I was an adult and, you know, pretty much when he was gone, you
Oh,
know.
okay. Okay.
So,
Yeah, reading
you know,
his memoirs.
yeah, reading his memoirs, it's like, oh my God, you know, I had no idea.
I mean, he
So,
did so much in the civil rights movement before he became a board of supervisor, the first black board
yeah,
of supervisor.
that's
So
true.
I was just like, oh my goodness. And then he was also a director and president for the NAACP
Yes.
and did a
Yeah.
lot of stuff there.
Yeah. He did.
And so, like in 1964, the mayor John Shelley appointed him to fill a vacant seat on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. So that's how he got in. And then he would keep that seat for the next 13 years.
Yes.
So, talk about what you know about your dad, some of his challenges and some of his struggles as a board of
Uh-huh.
supervisor.
Well, it's right around the time that he first got on the board, there was a vote regarding having another freeway built. Actually, the corridor, I guess, probably from down. There was a freeway that was going to go all the way up Fell and Oak Street to Golden
Okay.
Gate Park and go underneath. You know, there was going to be a tunnel to 19th Avenue or Park Presidio to go to the Golden Gate Bridge. There were, you know, so that would have taken out a lot of a lot of the house, a lot.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
can
Yeah.
you imagine doing that from we're at the foot of Fell? I guess it would have extended out. So his was the deciding vote to not build that freeway. And
Wow.
yeah, you know, back then they were all into freeways. They wanted things to happen fast. Also, 19th Avenue was going to be a freeway, a raised
Oh,
freeway,
wow.
kind of like the Embarcadero Freeway. And his
Okay.
was the deciding vote around that.
Wow.
But also, Trans-American Pyramid. Originally, that was going to be, you know, like you know, just a regular rectangular building.
Building. Mm-hmm.
And the other business owners around there said, you know, that's going to cut off our light. You know, it's going to put us in the shade. And they were trying to squash that building from being built. But, you know, the supervisors told the developers to come back with a different design. And they came back with the pyramid shape.
Oh,
But
wow.
then, you know, when everybody was like, oh, that's going to be so ugly, especially like Herb Cain. Herb Cain actually wrote in his column, you know, he that you know, Francois, you know, voted on this strange looking building, and you know, why do we
So,
want a building that looks like that? We never, you know, nobody has a. Anyway, it became the iconic building for the skyline.
okay. Okay.
We
Absolutely.
saw afterwards. I mean, you knew where you were because of that building. You know,
Yes.
otherwise,
Yeah.
any other city. So,
You
you know, he was a deciding vote on, legislation that had really lasting kind of,
and he did a lot of stuff for public
yeah,
housing. Yeah, he
yeah.
definitely.
Well, he, prior to, initiated the case that allowed Blacks to live in public housing in the country. There was a case, it's called Banks versus the Housing Authority in San Francisco.
Okay.
And he and Lauren Miller, another attorney out of LA, another Black attorney, ended up arguing this case all the way to the Supreme Court. And and they won. So that's how Black people were able to live in public housing. That was segregated too. So yeah.
I mean, he did so much more. There's just so much to talk about. You know what? I want to show a slideshow real quick
Okay.
of your dad, if that's okay. So give me a moment and then I'll get ready to share my screen. So let's do this real quick. What did I do? So are you seeing my
Yeah.
slideshow? Okay.
Yeah. There we
So
go.
okay, so you can actually talk about the slides as I go through them, if you don't
Okay.
mind. So like this picture, how old was your dad? He looks really young on this picture.
Yeah. He was probably early 20s and
Okay. Handsome some. Now I see why your mom was like, you know what? Oh, she had an eye.
Shoot. Yeah. So okay. So yeah, he was in the first Blacks to enter the Marine Corps in 1942. He ended up a platoon sergeant, and he had I think about 2,000 troops under him.
Wow.
And
Wow. Just amazing.
yeah. So that one's their wedding day in Oakland. Let's see. She was, I think, around 21 when they married, which would have made him about 25.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
look at them. They look
Yeah.
so happy.
But interestingly, they were poor. I mean, he was just starting out. I don't even know if he had if he had passed the bar yet. I think he
Okay.
might have still been in law school. But when my brother was born, my brother Wade was born a year later, and my mother tells the story of how they were so poor he didn't even have a cradle. They used to put him in the drawer.
I think a lot of Black people did that back during that time, because I've heard other stories like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I still have that chest of drawers. So yeah, it was my grandmother's. Anyway, this was about 1970. About 1970, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's all the boys, and there you are. You look adorable.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And your mom was such a sweetie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was an
But
elegant.
I'm looking at Eric on this picture, and all I see is Terry.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah.
His son looks just like him.
Looks just like him.
Okay, what is this? Talk to me.
So this was the first board that he served on. This was about 1964. And there's George Moscone over there standing next to him.
Oh, is that George Moscone next to him?
George Moscone, yeah, he was a supervisor with him. I don't remember all their names. I think the guy, two guys over from Moscone is Ortola, George Ortola. The other guys, I don't remember. I was infant then.
Do you know who the lady is? Do you know who the lady is?
I don't remember her name. No,
Okay.
I remember the woman after her was Dorothy von Barreldinger, something like that. But yeah. Oh, yeah, that was the newspaper article from the day after he was sworn in.
Okay.
There I am.
Oh, let me go back. Yeah, that's you as the baby.
Yeah. Yeah,
How sweet.
yeah,
Girl, you know what? That's over with my eyes. Francois wins a city hall
yeah. He got
ovation.
a standing ovation. He was the first Black supervisor. So yeah, it was a milestone.
Of course, and now he's got a street named after him, right?
Yes, yeah. There used to be on China Basin Street, and now it's Terry
Okay.
Francois Boulevard. He's got on one end is the baseball park, and the other end is the basketball Chase Center.
Isn't that
So you
beautiful?
would
And the
love that.
simple fact when you said the baseball, then the next thing comes up is Willie Mays.
Oh yeah,
Talk to
there's
me about this.
yeah. So when San Francisco got I guess they bought the New York Giants. There was the Giants. They brought them to San Francisco. And they became the San Francisco Giants. And Willie Mays was a star player. And of course, he wanted to buy a home. But they gave him a parade and stuff when they first got here. And then, the home he chose was near St. Francis Woods, which is one of the most affluent parts of town. But of course, he could entertain them, but they didn't want him to live next door. So, there was a whole thing with the developer, and the neighbors were in an uproar and didn't want him to be able to buy the house. And so he hired my father as an attorney, and he negotiated the deal, and he ended up being able to buy his home. Interestingly enough, the house that I grew up in, that in Forest Hill area of San Francisco, the original covenants denied Black people, to be able to live there. But we were one of the first Black families to live in that area too. So,
Hearing you say that makes me think about A Raisin in the Sun with Sidney Poitier. Remember when the neighborhood people knocked on his door trying to get them not to move in? I'm
yeah,
like, you have got to be kidding me.
no,
And you know
shoot,
what? It still goes on, but now it's done differently. It's a
red
little
line,
more subtle. It's a little
yeah,
more subtle, but it's still
yeah,
happening.
yeah.
It's
Well, I
amazing.
mean, they can deny you a loan to
Yeah,
buy your house. I mean,
absolutely. And that happens quite
buy
often.
a house if you can't get
Or
a
the
loan.
house was already sold. They sold it already.
And then until somebody else calls that doesn't look or sound Black, and yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah. Then all of a sudden it's open again.
yeah.
Amazing.
My brother Gary, actually, I probably he had a fire at his house, and was trying to lease a place for, because he would need to lease a place for a couple of years. And he actually, I shouldn't say that the family is still around, but they did something like that. He went to
Yeah.
lease a place. He showed up. He liked it, and they said, "Oh no, it's been leased." And then his wife came, who's considerably, much more light skinned, and the place was available. So
Girl,
yeah.
honey. So tell me about this.
I,
I love this picture with your dad with Martin Luther King.
yeah. Actually, if you look at Martin Luther King's, he has a little button on his lapel, and that was
Uh-huh.
a Francois for Supervisor button.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, how cool.
So I think it was right before the elections in 1967,
Yeah.
my guess. But yeah, he had come out. They became friends at some point.
Yeah.
Of course, because he was going down the South and marching, and you know
Yeah.
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 Back
I mean,
then, like all the civil rights leaders, they were together. I mean,
yeah.
they met. There was no internet then, so they met in person. They formed allegiances and
Girl,
strategized.
and they were fighting for a purpose. They really, if it wasn't for these people, we would not have some of the freedoms that we have now.
It,
When I
it,
think about the different, the Black Board of Supervisors now, and even London Breed being mayor,
oh,
he
it's
had a
huge.
big part in opening the door
It's
for all
huge.
of this
Yeah.
success for them. So that's why I thought this interview was so important, that, you know, you don't really know where you're going forward until you know where you came from. And so having this is really important. So I appreciate you being here.
I appreciate you having me.
And then here we have Robert Kennedy.
Yeah. And that was, yeah. You know, the 60s, it was like everybody got taken out, you know.
I know.
So if you were trying to make some changes, you know, that was it.
Yeah.
It was rough.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and even
stopping those real important voices. They knew what they was doing.
Yeah, I remember going in my father's drawer one time, you know, being a kid, you know, you snoop around and stuff. And I found letters from some guy that was really, he was on him, you know, he said, I'm gonna kill you, nigger. I'm you know, I mean, it was common. Wow. I remember like being 6 years old and answering the phone and some man telling me he's going to kill my father, and you know, had my little child voice, you know, it didn't matter. He did, you know, yeah, I'm gonna kill your daddy. You know, it's like, oh my God, how do you make sense of that when you're that age?
Yeah. And here he is with Adam Clayton Powell. You didn't know this other gentleman, huh?
Yeah, I don't know who he is.
Really nice photos.
Yeah, thanks. So this was, I think, the last board that he sat with. And as you can see, Dianne Feinstein was the president of the board then. And let's see, Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi's brother-in-law is standing in front of my father, Ron Pelosi, with the board. And Dorothy von Barreldinger was a woman. There was a Hispanic gentleman, Gonzalez, Robert Gonzalez. He's in
this one here,
huh? And Barbara Gelada, John Barbara Gelada, and Quentin Kopp is behind Dianne Feinstein.
Right, right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah.
And then this is your book.
That's my book. Yeah.
And so this is what Lincoln, and so did Sasha and Malia, in terms of the time travel, they visited Lincoln, and is that what it?
That time, yeah, with you know, Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, and they had to rescue Frederick Douglass from, he was being held hostage.
And they rescued him. How fun is that?
Yeah, it was
that
cute.
Is too sweet.
And there was a little luminous ball. That's what got him back into time. The little ball.
I see that.
Those chasing. Yeah. I'm proud of that story.
It should be, because it's awesome. Very nice. So now, I know that when your dad retired from the Board of Supervisors, he had protested against a citizen initiative to change the way supervisors were elected.
Yeah, the district election.
About that?
There was, right around that time, district elections was coming to the forefront. You know, they were having votes on whether or not to do district elections, and he and actually Supervisor Barbara Gelada were really against it, because they felt like, if number one, you lose 10 supervisors, that, you know, if you were just relegated to one, and that it would kind of balkanize the city. You know, each supervisor would be only interested in what's going on in their area rather than the city at large. And I think, you know, we're seeing some of the ramifications of that now. You know, it seems like the supervisors and the mayor are not on the same page, and it's hard for her to get consensus amongst them. You know, everyone kind of looking out for their own neighborhoods, and you know, but I think, you know, it won, and I think they had a another petition to get rid of it, and I think they got rid of it for a minute, and then it won again, and it's been in place ever since. Yeah,
I guess you
yeah,
can't win them all.
yeah. But they
Yeah.
felt that it would be bad for the city to
Yeah.
have district elections, and back then the supervisors were considered part-time. And it was in the city charter that they'd be part-time. And but they, everybody else had jobs, but they really worked hard. It was more than a full-time job. And when he was supervisor, they made like $9,000 a year. That was the salary, like $9,000 a year. So you really had to be, about the work and not about, trying to make some money.
Exactly.
A paycheck.
Wow. Wow. So I know that in the future, you definitely plan on doing some more work with his memoirs to get it out there.
Mm-hmm.
So people can really see, because I think we didn't really even touch the surface of the types of things that he's done, but just kind of giving people whetting their appetite a little bit, I think is what we've done. And I really hope that you do start working on that real soon. Now, I would actually like to thank you for taking out the time to talk about your dad and sharing some of the stories and those wonderful pictures. But now I want to ask you a couple of questions. Like, who were some of name 3 people that have inspired you?
Oh, God. Besides him?
Yes.
Well, I'd say my acupuncture teacher, Angela Wu. Let's say the woman that started the school that my father, they worked together to found. Her name's Frances Cessna.
Okay.
And my mom.
Okay. There you go. Now, what do you think the 9-year-old Terry Francois would say to the grown man Terry Francois today if he was here? What would he say? What do you think he would say?
Well, I guess it would be the same as the epitaph on his gravestone, which is just tell him I tried to help somebody.
Oh,
it was
how
a
sweet
life
is
of
that?
service. Yeah, and I didn't know until I was an adult that his grandfather was very instrumental in helping the community where he lived in Donaldsonville, Louisiana. He was probably the first Black physician in the area, but he also owned land and grew crops, and he had like 200 people that worked for him. But his was a life of philanthropy, and there's a school named after him. His name was John Harvey Lowry.
Okay.
But that was my, so he has a legacy that he's come from, that came before him, of service.
That's beautiful. Now, is there anything that you would like to say to the listening audience before we say goodbye?
I guess just to live a life of caring for each other, as we're in this time, this very strange time of the pandemic, and it's kind of a pause of the life that we were living, the craziness and I think it's a time for self-reflection and to remember that we are all one community. I think in my church I say the only thing that really needs to be healed is our sense of separation, because we're not really separated. We just think we are, but we are all one community, people.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So, Carol, thank you so much for taking out the time to be with me on Straight Talking with Kelly, where real conversations happen. To my listening audience, I'd like to thank you for joining us. Please find me on YouTube, on my YouTube channel called Straight Talking with Kelly. Subscribe, comment, share, and I'll see you next time. Thanks
Thank you.
again. And thank you, Carol.
Have a good one. Thank you.